Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton and one of our very special dear friends and guests, Cathy, Morrow, Roberson, with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Cathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
We're doing wonderful. We were just talking pre-show. I need to compile the rankings in terms of our repeat guest appearances, but I think you're like top 5 all time. And that comes with maybe a championship belt and a bottle of cheer wine, maybe. I don't know.
Awesome.
What you think?
Yeah.
You'll take it. Is that right?
I'll take it.
All right. We're going to have a lot of fun today. It's great to have Cathy back with us. As I mentioned, one of our favorite guests here at Supply Chain Now, one of our most regular repeat guests. Today, though, we're going to be diving into some of Cathy's great analyst work, right? Especially the market intel that she gathers from earnings calls and then some. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And as I've said, I think on every one of your appearances, Cathy, if folks, if they aren't following you in general, but especially on Twitter, where you drop all these nuggets of market information and analysis and intel, they are really missing out. I know I've really come to value and enjoy your perspective there, huh?
Thank you so much. Formerly I was a librarian for many years, so I look at social media as being my library. So it's just that need to share.
And you
sometimes
like
a little too much, but hey, you can turn me off if need be.
But you like to make social media social, as you shared here a couple times, as it should be. And we've talked about some of the real relationships that started initially digital, and that's been one of the silver linings over the last 3 years, probably. Okay, so Cathy, I want to start with for some of the folks that may have missed some of your appearances here, some of your other great work that you do. For the 3 people out there, maybe let's make sure they have an opportunity to get to know you a little better. So tell us where you grew up and some anecdotes about your upbringing a little bit, Cathy.
Oh dear. Okay, so I grew up in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Graduated high school there. Went to got my undergraduate degree there at Winthrop.
Okay.
It was Winthrop College at the time. Now it's Winthrop University.
And that's home of Winthrop. Is the a lot of folks may know them. They've made appearances in the NCAA basketball tournaments. What's their mascot, Cathy?
The Eagle.
Yes. Okay. I know. So Wofford's the Terriers. Winthrop is the Eagles. I always get them vice versa. Okay. So you went to Winthrop. Mm-hmm. And then what?
And then it kind of dawned on me. I couldn't exactly find a job with a degree in history. So I was working at a library at the time, driving the bookmobile. And so the kind people at the library said, why don't you get a master's in library science? Because you can always get a job in the library. So
was that true?
Well, it was at that time. It's no longer the case.
Really?
Yeah, no. So many public libraries in particular are funded by local, state, and federal money. So it's usually, if you got to cut a budget, it's usually the library's budget that gets cut. So
really,
so we went through a lot of ups and downs while I was a librarian. But yeah, I got my master's from the University of South Carolina.
Okay.
And, proudly wearing my Clemson T-shirt there. Yeah. And today I support both teams. But yeah.
So
after several years as a librarian, I made the jump into the corporate world.
So I want to talk about that in just a second. But before we get there, growing up in Rock Hill, you and I both grew up in South Carolina, right? Now, I grew up in Aiken, which is on the southern border, right, of Georgia and along the Savannah River, and Rock Hill is I think on the northern border. Is that right, Cathy?
Just south of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, so we're kind of opposite sides of the state. I know some of my food favorites that I grew up with. We love talking food around here. When you think of growing up in Rock Hill, what's a food dish or a restaurant or something that was inseparable from your upbringing?
Okay, in Rock Hill, there was a place, Watkins.
Okay.
It's been around, I don't know how long it's been around, forever. I mean, well before I was born, and that's been a long time. But they made the best hot dogs, chili slaw dogs. Oh my God, they were wonderful. And my parents grew up in Spartanburg. So, at least once a month, we'd go to Spartanburg to visit my grandparents, and we always had lunch at the Beacon.
Oh, yeah. Man, you're making me hungry, Cathy. Dadgum, I shouldn't ask this question. Plus, you had me at the chili slaw dog. I've had to watch myself, right? Because hot chili slaw dogs or slaw dogs in general are addictive. So I've got good things in moderation. But man, I think we're probably one of the few states. Slaw dogs are kind of a South Carolina thing, aren't they, Cathy?
I think so. Well, now there is a place here in the over in Marietta.
Yeah.
A shout out to them, Brandy's Hot Dog. They do a mean chili slaw dog. Okay. Oh my God, it's just a hole in the wall, friendliest place you
best places. Yeah.
Icy chili. It's fantastic. It's almost as good as Watkins.
All right. So Watkins and Brandy's, some of these great places to eat, present and past. All right. So let's get back. So the library world was important for you right out of college. And then I interrupted you a second ago as you were about to talk about your breakthrough into the corporate world. So on that note, tell us, what's a couple of roles that you held in corporate America or in supply chain, or you name it, that really shaped your path forward?
I think working at UPS really shaped a lot of it. In fact, I mean, that's where I'd learned about supply chains. I had never heard of supply chains until I started working at UPS.
Right.
And I joined them simply because I had friends already working there. And they had reached out to me. They were like, we're getting ready to start a new products development team that's not focused on packages, and we need help with research. And we know you enjoy doing research. So that's how I came to join UPS. And it was a blast. I mean, I learned so much about supply chains through the almost 11 years I was with them.
Really?
Yeah.
What a great marriage between your research side and your that library world side with global supply chain, where there's no shortage of probably research to be done. I mean, this is like a marriage made in heaven. It sounds like, Cathy, to me.
I certainly thought it was. I was involved in helping out the M&A team with several acquisitions, doing their initial research for them. Anytime that we moved into a particular market or geography, I did that legwork. So yeah, it was fun. Also, out of our group came UPS Supply Chain Solutions, and that was the team that I stayed with my entire time, primarily in freight forwarding.
Okay. And I think we've got some colleagues in common. I want to say we've talked about Lloyd Knight before. We're big Lloyd Knight fans, right?
Lloyd was my last manager at UPS. So he was in charge of the government sector.
Okay.
And so we helped, within his group, we helped manage transportation for the AFES group, the former PX group.
Oh, yeah. AFES. So any of our veterans listening, at least AFES was around. Has it changed? When I was in the Air Force, AFES ran the the BXs, I think what we call on Air Force bases, the base exchange. They ran the convenience stores or the class 6 stores, I think is what we called it. Is AFES still doing what they do?
Yeah, they're still doing what they're doing. Yeah, I mean, we used to stop off at these places because my grandfather was in the military and he retired. So we would always stop off at the military base close to Myrtle Beach, I believe.
Okay.
I forgot the name. And we'd always do our shopping there. But they weren't called AFES at the time. I think it was just the old PX or BX.
Yeah. And so I got out in 2002. So it's been a long time since I've even thought about that, Cathy. Thank you for bringing that memory. AFES, I remember the logo still. And I think that was Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. I think that closed down right after like Desert Storm in the mid 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But that's a blast from the past too. All right. So, and by the way, I appreciate the good work you've done with us and in general for our veteran community. So really appreciate that, Cathy. All right. So let's shift gears over to our center plate. It's our chili slaw dog up the conversation day. It's these investors.
Dog.
That's right. Oh gosh, these investor and earnings calls that you tune into regularly, right? I really, as I mentioned on the front end, really appreciate all that you share from this wealth of information. Now, before we get into a couple of the UPS call, the FedEx call, and some others, how long have you been doing this, and why should more folks tune into these calls?
Okay, I have been doing these since my UPS days. So
for quite some time.
So I did a lot of competitive analysis back in the day. So I would sit in on FedEx's earnings calls, DHL, you name it, any major logistics provider. I would listen to their calls on behalf of, just to gather intelligence for UPS. But really the fun was sitting in on UPS's calls because there'd be a whole group of us in a room listening into the calls, and we would cringe like, oh my gosh, no, don't say that. Don't answer that question. Don't answer, we'd be yelling, But, there was a lot of work that went before these calls that we would work on, the market updates, the revenue. We did a lot of that, in my group. So yeah, it was hilarious. Some of them didn't have much of a personality on the calls, and we would just be screaming, in the rooms. But yeah, it was rather fun.
So you've been.
I've been listening to the UPS calls ever since then, as well as the FedEx ones. Those have been the two primary ones. I mean, that's going on 20 years,
wow,
if not a little longer, of listening to their calls. So it's been an interesting journey to see how both companies have evolved.
Oh gosh, you're absolutely right. It is amazing to see how the ups and the downs and the evolution of both those organizations. And occasionally, if I recall correctly from what I see, sometimes you'll jump on a retail earnings call or this earnings call, and you're piecing together kind of the global market and what companies are doing, huh?
Right. I am reading more retail and manufacturers. I'm either listening to them or I'm reading their the transcripts, because it's really interesting to hear from their point of view, what their pain points are, what they're experiencing, what their outlook is for the next quarter, next year, and what have you. And I think you can pull out a lot of valuable tidbits and a lot of good learnings from these calls. Now, you also have to keep in mind, understand how they're wording things as well, because they want to please Wall Street. So they don't want to sit there and go, oh my God, we sucked, this quarter. No, they'll say it in a very nice manner. And maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry.
No, I think really quick, I think that's really important message to our listeners, right? Because it's not always what folks are saying. And we're not picking on anyone in particular. It's the C-suite that the responsibilities to your point, kind of maybe not walk a tightrope, but to please, put the right message out there, right? A positive message out there. And sometimes it's not what they say, but it's really what they mean, or maybe even what they're not saying sometimes. Would you say, Cathy?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So you almost have to be able to read between the lines, the invisible lines, and just understand the companies. As if you're just listening to a company for the first time, you'll get some valuable information. But if you've listened to them for a number of years or a year, you'll start seeing a pattern.
Yep. Okay, so folks, that's a great opportunity to learn and to connect the dots, whether you're just, whether you're a student, right? Maybe you're going through a supply chain program right now. That's a big wealth of information. Or if you're, a senior executive listening to us right now, and maybe you haven't ever stopped and taken the time to see, to Cathy's point, what your competitors are doing, what other business leaders are doing about the challenges of our day. Whether you're listening to the calls, Cathy said, or you get I guess the transcripts are free. You can get those, and sometimes that's easier to navigate.
Point.
Yeah,
up to a certain point, you can listen. There's various websites that you can read a certain number for free before they start telling you got to subscribe.
Okay.
So Seeking Alpha, there's a Motley Fool board that I'll tap into at times. So it depends. I mean, I do have a subscription to Seeking Alpha just because I'm constantly reading these transcripts. But not only reading the transcripts is important, but also reading the actual SEC filings, because there's usually a lot more in those 10Qs and those annual filings. Not necessarily the pretty annual reports,
right.
The very glossy look, but the actual 10K filings with the SEC. That's where you can find a lot of industry information. So if you're having to do research on a particular industry, definitely recommend reading a 10K filing, because it'll give you that as well as competitors and just the market overview, how they've been performing and such.
Okay. Man, I'm glad there's smart folks out there that really do meaningful research, including tax forms. That's a lot different than the comic books. I mean, that's some heavy duty stuff. So, and it sounds like that's it's one of the channels where you get the market intel that you've become so well known for sharing. So let's dive into some of that. Two of your favorite companies that you've established to check out these earnings calls are UPS and FedEx, and I believe UPS held their most recent earning call yesterday, at least when we're recording this podcast, and FedEx's was in September, if I had that right.
Correct.
Right? So
Correct.
Let's talk about you. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with the good first.
Okay.
Let's start with UPS.
So what are some of the most important things that you picked up on the recent earnings call then?
I think, first of all, Ms. Tomei, the CEO, in her opening remarks, she said that the third quarter, which that was the earnings that they announced yesterday, had the highest consolidated operating margin for third quarter in 15 years. For them to have such a high margin like that was a welcome surprise, I think, to the market. Meaning they're holding their own. They're managing their cost. They're managing their capacity. They're doing this in a time that we're seeing a normalization occur across all industries. And this normalization, as I've described it in various articles that I've written, it's a bumpy road. So, and it's going to hurt. It'll be hurtful. You see spot rates falling as compared to last year. Contract rates may be declining and such as that. But they did a fantastic job, in my opinion, over this past third quarter. And it's the third quarter that ended on September 30th. So now and I said they did a fantastic job. That's the way they did it was, they raised surcharges.
Right.
They are able to pick and choose really their customers, and they want more profitable customers, of course.
Well, and that seems really quick, Cathy. That seems to be when Carol Tomei assumed the lead for the company, right, as CEO. That seems like be one of her priorities from the get-go, right? Serving more smart business and really protecting those margins, right? It seems to be what she got starting with, right?
Carol Tomei, who is the CEO of UPS, she was prior to that CFO of Home Depot. And she also sat on UPS's board for a number of years. So she understood UPS's ways and such, but she also brought to UPS that outsider's view, from a financial perspective, which I think was so much needed for the company, because it's always been so internally focused, which is nothing wrong with that, but the world has changed greatly,
right,
in the past 20 years, and they really needed that outside perspective, and she brought it. She had, she had, each service offering reevaluated, and such as that, and she cut the fat out in a lot of places that needed to be cut out. Some of that fat may have been a little too much, but who am I to say? I'm not a CEO.
But the third quarter results from all of those tough decisions seems like a lot of those were good moves, huh?
That decision to cut as well as to invest the correct way. They've invested a lot in technology, automation of facilities. It's just absolutely astounding. So they're making their operations more and more efficient thanks to this technology, cutting out unnecessary line hauls and such, optimizing routes. All of this is saving them money. But at the same time, it's, the shipping cost. Man, they hurt shippers. But yeah, after 2.5 years, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So anything before we switch over to FedEx and what you picked up on their recent calls, any last comments around what you heard yesterday on the UPS call?
The holiday season. So they're more or less expecting a return to a normal type of holiday season, pre-pandemic. So the peak volumes won't hit until later in the season. It's because we're all returning to the stores and such. But at the same time, they're expecting fourth quarter volumes to be down year over year.
Yeah.
Not surprising. Surprising. So.
All right. So UPS strong third quarter, right? A lot of wins there. As I'm looking at a recent Wall Street Journal, it sounds like Domino's Pizza and IKEA in particular, had a record revenue quarter, if I'm not mistaken. So it sounds like those are a lot of the winners right now. And by the way, speaking of a complete aside, Domino's has reinvented a lot of their products. Now, I like the mom and pop pizza joints, and we have a lot of those out there where I live. But occasionally, you'll have to get something delivered, and I tell you, Domino's Pizza's come a long way, especially now they're deep dish. Cathy, how do we always? Everything goes back to food, right? Hot dogs, pizza, cheerwine, you name it. But hey, that's from my earnings call analysis. Okay, so let's.
What's interesting? Now, before we switch over to FedEx, if I may, retailers are beginning to announce their third quarter earnings. And this week, there's quite a few that's on the schedule. Skechers. I don't know do you wear Skechers?
I don't, but maybe I should.
I don't wear them either. They don't fit properly. So maybe, Skechers, if you're listening, please, help me here. But they announced a really nice quarter. yesterday. However, despite that revenue, good revenue, overall revenue, they're struggling with inventory. That's going to be the story with a lot of retailers is, there's a lot of inventory, and it's not because they all decided to go out and just order massive amounts of inventory. There's a lot of reasons for this inventory
bonanza.
Hangover.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we had, and it starts further up in the supply chain. When you have manufacturing in China, most of the manufacturing is in China or in other Asian countries. But when they shut down because of COVID and a COVID outbreak, that has that ripple effect down to our front door. And so that off again, on again, shutdowns of manufacturing, plus capacity on the ocean freight lanes, plus capacity constraints in the trucking and rail, intermodal, just resulted in not only delays in getting your inventory, retailers' inventories, but also all of a sudden you're getting all this inventory, in bunches. So you're getting Christmas stuff in March, you're getting Halloween stuff in January, but it's all coming in big, massive bunches, which is causing shortages in warehouse space and such. So that whole buildup is also playing into this inventory hangover. Also inflation costs. So when you see, oh my gosh, inventories were up $45 billion year over year. Well, a good bit of that is also inflation, higher cost to manufacture that inventory, higher cost to ship that inventory, and so on. So there's a lot more to that inventory.
Yeah, it's not just placing big orders, because of the uncertainty. It's a wide variety of factors as you're laying out. In fact, speaking of inflation, I know Halloween's right around the corner from when we'll be publishing this conversation. And in general, I think I saw earlier this week, candy is about 12-13% across the board more than last year. But Skittles and Starburst in particular, one was up over 40% from last year, and one was up over 30% last year. So if you like Skittles and Starburst, prepare to pay more this year. All right.
Well, there was a shortage of Halloween candy last year.
Right.
You remember that?
And there's been some warnings this year from what candy company was that talked about how it wasn't Nestle, it was I think it was Hershey. Hershey's CEO came out and talked about maybe the lack of capacity they have because they've been dedicating so much to year-long demand. Now, who knows? Going back to C-suite language and positioning, who knows? I'll leave that to the smart analysts like yourself. But Cathy, I'm never, whether it's Twix or Snickers or even the less popular stuff, we'll get our candy fix some way, shape, or form. Okay.
The day after Halloween.
Yes, I'll take it for my kids, Cathy. Don't tell them that. Just between you and me. All right. So we've talked about a lot of stuff so far. Certainly UPS, their big third quarter. Got some of your other industry observations across retail. We talked about the inventory bonanza and some of the reasons why and why it's not just real simple. There's a lot of complex, a lot of moving pieces, as probably all of our listeners know, across global supply chain. So now let's talk about FedEx, because it's really a tale of two cities if I'm tracking with you here. So tell us about the FedEx call. I think it was in September.
Yeah. So trying to think of a nice way of wording how to frame the FedEx story. So FedEx reported in September, and it was for their fiscal first quarter.
Okay.
Which was June to August. And it was not a pretty picture. It was not at all. And the blame was placed on the global economic conditions, stating that we were heading down the path towards recession. The whole Russia-Ukraine issue, higher cost, inflation, everything was blamed on their quarter, which they missed totally. I mean, profit, I don't have the exact numbers, but the numbers were not good. Let's just put it that way. The only shining light was FedEx Express. Not FedEx Express, excuse me, that one was not a good one. FedEx Freight. FedEx Freight was the shining light. They came out profitable. They grew. It was through revenue management, which is, let's charge more. But I mean, it was fuel surcharges, higher fuel prices that they had to pass on to their customers and such. FedEx Express and FedEx Ground, both, which have been such leading divisions within FedEx, just did not have a good quarter whatsoever. And really, I think it boils down, and this is me, and just looking at their numbers and listening to their calls for years and years, to me, it was more, the reason really was internal, not necessarily external. Yes, external probably did play a role, but internally, they've got a lot of work that needs to be done because each division, FedEx Express, FedEx Ground, FedEx Freight, has historically operated as separately. They did not speak to each other. They had their own networks. So, if you threw a FedEx Ground package into FedEx Express's network, it would spit it back out going, yeah, no. But they've been trying to integrate these networks.
There's got to be some economies of scale there, Cathy, that maybe they've missed out on.
I mean, it took them too long to really realize they needed to be doing this. Maybe they've known all along that they've needed to do this, but they started doing it right before the pandemic hit. And then, the world turned upside down after that, but they still kept pursuing this, and they're still working on it, but it's difficult and it's going to take time. And I'm not sure they can succeed, really, just knowing how rigid these divisions, these networks have been. They have shared some of their progress and their success stories. FedEx Freight jumping in, carrying some of the ground stuff. Express jumping in, carrying some of the ground stuff. But the problem is FedEx Express, FedEx Freight, those are FedEx employees. FedEx Ground, those are contractors. Not in the sense of an Instacart or DoorDash. What it is FedEx Ground is, companies buy the routes,
right,
and then they manage those routes. They hire the workers and such, and they have to maintain. They sign a contract with FedEx with, the list of to-dos and not to-dos.
Yep, different culture, different operational landscape.
Exactly, and it's a lower cost network versus the Express and the Freight divisions. So that's where you see a lot of those. The cost, the impact, the profitability being hit and such. So part of the good news you're sharing from what's going on at FedEx is it sounds like they're starting to see some of they might be small fruits, but fruits of their labor in terms of getting these silos talking with each other and maybe collaborating with each other. And do you expect to see, if you had to break out your crystal ball, I know mine's been broken for forever, but do you see the path forward for FedEx based on what they're trying to do from a leadership and an integration and a kind of an ecosystem standpoint? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel, or at least some sort of light at the end of the tunnel? Well, okay, so that light is pretty dim at the moment. I mean, they really have a lot of work that needs to be done. But there's so many people rooting for them. I think they can pull it off. I really think they can. But it's going to take a while. And I don't know, they need to speed it up. But, I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money. There's a lot of articles, a lot of commentators out there that's calling for them to be sold.
Yes. Yes.
No,
I've heard a
that's
lot
not
about
going
that.
to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen?
No, that's not going to happen. I mean, Mr. Smith, the founder of FedEx, will not let that happen. I'm of the belief the company will go private before they would allow themselves to be sold.
Okay.
That's me again. And it's just, they're needed. They really are needed. It's a good company. It's just they have a lot of work they need to get done. That needs to get done. So,
well, I like how you're pulling for them. You're not watering down kind of the current state, right, with what they're battling. There's, as you mentioned, there's lots of work to be done, but we both know probably lots of good people that are part of the FedEx team and UPS team for sure, and we hope they get it going and they make progress in the throes of what they're going through. And
exactly.
By the way, I like your crystal. That's quite a crystal ball projection there. That rather than be acquired, they'll go private before that would happen. That's an interesting thought. Okay. Anything else? I want to shift gears over as we start to kind of come down the home stretch here. I want to ask about one of your favorite things in life. But before we go there, any last thoughts about FedEx?
Oh, goodness, no. But their next quarter announcement will be in December.
Okay.
For the November period. So I'm really looking forward to that, to see what kind of progress they've made. I do know that they had told Bree Carrere, who is one of their executive senior vice presidents, was on CNBC earlier this week or last week, and assured the public that they are ready for the holiday season. They did not give any projections like UPS has, but they have assured the market that they are ready and they are more than capable of handling, the holiday season. Instead of hiring seasonal workers like, UPS, the post office, Amazon, and so on, Ms. Carrere said that they're leaning into their existing workforce, their existing network, and they're going to flex it. And as the need, they will shift where needed. So,
okay. Interesting.
For us.
That's right. Okay. All right. So from FedEx, you mentioned Amazon a second ago. I saw you reporting the news that some folks in the industry have been talking about. Amazon is adding 10 Airbus 330-300s, if I said that right. Mm-hmm. And I think the Hawaiian airline company is going to be operating them for Amazon. It sounds like they're kind of upgrading their fleet and letting some of the older models maybe go into retirement. But your thoughts on that news?
Well, okay, so Amazon's so Hawaii Air is a new partner for Amazon. So they've added another partner. They've got quite a few now. Atlas, ATSG, UPS, Mesa. I can't name them all, but it's a long list. And now Hawaii Air is joining this group. And yeah, you're correct. They will be managing these 10 airplanes, management, flying them within the domestic U.S., also between Hawaii, between Hawaii and the U.S. as well. Right. I think, now this is me with the little wonky crystal ball. I think this is also going to be a play along the Trans-Pacific lane. So, Amazon they import a lot of items from Asia. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll eventually take advantage of these airplanes to move these imports into the U.S. themselves versus relying on other partners that may be doing that on their behalf. And you're also right. They are retiring some of the older planes that are up for renewal. They've leased these through other partners, and instead of signing those contracts, they're taking on new, bigger airplanes from Airbus. And I believe these are the first Airbuses that that's being put into their network. Because I think the rest have always been Boeing. I'm not sure. I could be wrong there. So it's going to be interesting to watch. But, it's good to see Amazon bullish on the air cargo market. UPS was also bullish on the air cargo market. Back in August, they ordered 4 new airplanes, and these are more fuel efficient airplanes. So they will be replacing probably some of the older models within UPS's fleet. So it's good to see this in the air market because the air cargo market has it's just kind of iffy. It's kind of iffy at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
The Boeing. Yeah, to put it nicely, the Boeing Airbus story. We'll have to have you back, and we'll dive into that. That's interesting, especially what Boeing has been through in recent years. So I guess it's a good win for Airbus. Those Titan aircraft. I wonder what the size of that deal was, but a good sale for Airbus to Amazon. Okay. Before we're going to talk about Freight Forward here in a second, one of your newest projects and publications that's really resonated with the marketplace. But before we leave air cargo, why is air cargo? Now, you're a big airplane enthusiast, I'll say, air cargo enthusiast. It seems to be one of your favorite things to report on and analyze and talk about. Why is that?
Well, despite the ocean freight port picture, I do have an airplane hanging above that. It's a C-130 that was made out of a beer can, which is absolutely fascinating to me. It was made by a gentleman who retired from Boeing. But the C-130 has a special place in my heart because my husband works for Lockheed, and he is on that C-130 line. So yeah, guess what our conversations are like, at the dinner table. But no, I've always loved airplanes. My uncles, my great uncles, were in the Air Force. They flew airplanes during World War II. My grandfather was in the Air Force as well. So I grew up with airplanes. And also, just to bring it back, towards air cargo, I was in the air freight forwarding group at UPS for a number of years. So yeah.
That makes sense.
That's where a lot of this still comes from. And, and today I write a column for Air Cargo World magazine. And I focus on express primarily, also freight forwarders, and sometimes I throw them a loop by sending them last mile stuff because that last mile impacts the rest of the supply chain as well.
That's right. Well, hey, here's a little factoid. I bet you already know this. I discovered this just a few weeks back. So Delta, right? One of the world's largest airlines. I'm not sure why I always made this assumption, but I thought the whole Delta brand name was meant to imply the Delta in service, the higher service they offer, and maybe some of the competition. I don't know where. Maybe I read that somewhere, or maybe I just made that assumption. But where they got that name from is in its origin story, right? A crop dusting company. I can't remember the name right off, but they were based really in the Mississippi Delta area. That was their primary territory. And so that's where the Delta name came from. And we're talking back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, a long time ago. And that's where the Delta that we all know and love now, where its origins came from. So how about that?
I had no idea.
Well, me and you both.
That's really cool. Huh.
So anyway, little factoid there. So let's move. Speaking of more good information, facts, industry takes, analysis. Freight Forward is a new. I call it new. I don't know how many editions have you published of Freight Forward roughly?
Well, 35.
Oh, really? Okay, so we can drop the new moniker. 35 editions. It's a LinkedIn driven newsletter. Is that right?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Those are really easy to access. They're easy to subscribe to. It's easy to. One of the things I love about those LinkedIn newsletters is it's easy to comment and engage in conversations, based on kind of the format and all. Whether you're engaging with the author or authors or other folks that are digesting the same information and talking about it. So tell us what type of content drives Freight Forward, and how where can folks sign up for it?
Okay, so Freight Forward came out from a discussion that I was having with some folks at the Journal of Commerce. And they just kind of threw it out at me. Why don't you start this newsletter out on LinkedIn and see where it goes? So what it is basically is I'll take some of the articles that the Journal of Commerce writes the previous week and try to tell the supply chain story, link it all together: ocean, air, trucking, rail, intermodal, all the way down to parcel. And it's not only Journal of Commerce articles. I'll throw in some of the air cargo world and some of the other publications that I know. A little bit
of this, a little bit of that, a little cinnamon.
Just kind of throwing in a little bit of stuff. And
Right.
Then I tell the supply chain story as a whole, because so many times when one is reading articles, it's very siloed again. It's very ocean freight specific, but it doesn't really tell the story of how does that impact the trucking or intermodal. So this is kind of my attempt to link it all together. And I do this really on behalf of the Journal of Commerce. I have always been a big fan of their articles. I've used them for a lot of the work that I've done for clients. And I've known them going back to my UPS days. And also at the end of each Freight Forward, I'll add an economic outlook, what's coming up in that given week, the PPI, the CPI, GDP, whatever, and a link to that. So, because those have really huge impact on supply chains. But it's free, and people can just really go on. Not really sure how you find the newsletters. Do you have to look it up under my name, or can you do a search?
Probably both, but we'll make it easy. So we will put a link maybe to the most recent one on the episode page, so folks can click on that, one click away, and then they can also from there they can subscribe or connect with you. How's that sound, Cathy?
Cool. That sounds good. They come out every Monday morning. I try to get them out by 6 o'clock in the morning, but sometimes it's easier said than done. Just depends.
Wow. It's good content. And if you got to wait till 7, it's worth waiting for. So y'all check out Freight Forward. And again, you can connect. We'll have a link in the episode page, episode notes, but you can connect also, search Cathy Morrow Roberson on LinkedIn and find it that way. Or probably, I bet if you drop Freight Forward in the LinkedIn search bar, I'm not sure if they've added a newsletter specific search just yet. But regardless, hey, we're going to have the link for you in the episode notes. All right.
You also have a nice LinkedIn newsletter too.
So ours is new. We have been experimenting a little bit. Cathy, we've been collaborating for so long and putting out so much content. We really, we were looking for something more unique. So we weren't just, sharing our podcasts and live streams. I kind of wanted it to be about business, but a little bit of history, a little bit of our points of view that some of our hosts have that may be, missed in all the shuffle. So yeah, we've been, it's called With That Said. I think we're 10 or 11 editions in, and it's been a fun project. So that's where we came across that Delta origin story and corrected our assumption there. So it's been really fun.
It's a good newsletter. I subscribe to it.
Well, hey, man, that makes my day, man. When great writers and analysts and pros like you appreciate content, I think that's always very rewarding. So folks, check out Freight Forward, great LinkedIn newsletter. Check out With That Said. That's our Supply Chain Now LinkedIn newsletter. How can folks connect with you, Cathy? I know Journal of Commerce, great work you're doing there. Eric Johnson, we're big fans of Eric and yours. Of course, our friends at Reverse Logistics Association, Tony Sirota, great team over there. That's just the tip of the iceberg on some other stuff that you're cooking up and working on. How can folks connect with you, though?
Honestly, the best way is through social media. So, yeah, LinkedIn or my Twitter feed, which is CM Roberson 06.
You beat me to it. I was just about to share, folks. If you're on, Cathy, we've talked about this before. Twitter is like black licorice. It's like Crocs. It's either you love it, you love them, you're big fans, or you're not, right? Folks, if you're on Twitter, all right, and especially if you love all things supply chain and global business and what we've been talking about here today, make sure, do yourself a favor, follow Cathy, and that's at CM Roberson 06, right, Cathy?
Yeah, I mean, you also get photographs of my hikes, pictures of my cat, progress of house projects. So yeah,
I love it. It's life. It's life, and it's social media. It's social media. It's important to share how life.
I also do a blog post on Substack as well. That link is on my Twitter profile. So
excellent. All right, we're connecting the dots here for our listeners. But Cathy, always a big fan of what you do. Appreciate our friendship and collaboration going back years now. Keep doing it. You're informing so many folks and filling in that blind spot that we all have as humans or supply chain practitioners or you name it. And it's a ton of fun. So Cathy, really appreciate you joining me here today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to do it again soon. I think we've got a couple more episodes teed up, monthly episodes, where we're really going to dive into Cathy's observations and analysis of companies and operations out there, what's going on. So stay tuned for that. This is the first one, and we're going to wrap the year on a high note with the November and December shows along those lines. So big thanks to Cathy and Morrow Roberson for joining me today and having a great conversation. Hey, to all the folks that tuned in, whether it's a video version or a podcast version, thank you. Let us know what you think. Reach out, start a social thread, hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of some of the points and conversations we've had here today. But most importantly, folks, Scott Luton, on behalf of our entire Supply Chain Now team, challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.